Welcome everyone to another episode of Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia.
Hello, welcome. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're listening from, right?
Yeah.
Which we're always excited to hear where you're listening from. So please put in the comments, like, where are you today? And of course, what's the weather? Because in Baltimore, it's gloomy and rainy, and it makes me want to curl up and sleep.
Well, and of course, and I love that you added that it might not be morning everywhere or midday, because of course, Stephanie, if you haven't, we're going to introduce Stephanie in just a minute, but she's our guest today. You're certainly not in the it's not morning by you.
No, actually, well, first of all, hello to everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. Well, it's 6 p.m. really where I am in Germany, and so it's already dark out. It's really cold, and yeah, I can really get your idea of snuggling up and just laying down, having a hot cocoa or whatever it is. And
right, you should actually probably have a glass of wine with you right now.
I'm having a cup of tea.
We'll pretend it's wine. That almost is
right, exactly.
It's as much fun. So
that's awesome.
Well, and if you're joining us, obviously we're going to talk about this in a minute, but I am excited for us to talk about this intersection of leadership and recalls. That's why Stephanie is with us today.
Yes.
So on that note, I'd love for the audience, like, drop an emoji on how you feel about recalls. Yeah, I would love to see what we all have come in. So take a moment, get in there. And if it's maybe not an emoji, even like a word on how you feel when somebody talks about recalls.
Yeah. Now, I wish I can add like my emoji, right? It's like, I probably would add like 2 or 3 or 4 of them of all the emotions, right? That comes with even just a possible recall that you might have to pull back product, and then the emotions of if you have to actually go and pull back product. And I'm sure we can ask this question in many different ways, like how do you feel even if there was a recall and you didn't have support, right? Like, I'm just thinking about some of my roles, like not having that support. Woo. Yeah. And maybe it's the running away emoji.
And maybe even a blindfolding emoji, because that's what happens too.
Yeah.
Especially on the C-suite. They just don't want to have anything to do with recalls. Don't want to hear about them. Or, like go with the apes. Hear no, say no.
Right.
It's just, right, exactly.
Yeah, we have a few coming in, which I think I see a theme here as we talk about some of these emojis. So
okay, want to share? Because I can see the comments.
Can you see the comments, Stephanie?
No, I cannot.
Oh, okay. Well, Claire, you've got one that's like the massive frowny. Brian's got the skull and crossbones, and Nikki the like. I don't know if I described that right, but that's my interpretation.
That was perfect, Jill.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, we feel like that, right? When we hear the word recall, right?
Yeah,
we do. Yes. Hello, Felix. It's good to have you with us.
Hi, Felix. And it's really fun. When we met in Pittsburgh and we had this women in food safety meeting, there was one woman and she was sitting right across the table from me. And she said, "Oh, so you're in the recall business? That makes you the woman I don't ever want to see." And I said, "No, you're absolutely wrong. I am the woman you desperately want to see, because it is so important to do a recall right, because then you can protect consumers the best way possible." And that it shows in our everyday life.
Yeah. Well, and I know we haven't, we're going to dive in even more, but I think even when we talk about this, like, right, the story we tell ourselves in our head, I think we can tell from the emojis that are being shared, and even the story you just shared, that when we think about recalls, we're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so even when we think about, because we're going to talk about this intersection of recalls and leadership, how do we change the story on how we think and talk about recalls?
Because that's important, right? It's important as we think about leadership, like Stephanie, you even said, like maybe the emoji, the blindfold emoji, because a lot of times people, because of that fear, right, because of those emotions, sometimes as leaders we don't get involved, right? Like leadership is like, nope, someone else is handling it, I don't want to be involved with it, I don't want to know the ins and out of it, I have something else that's important to do. And so I love this, like what we're going to talk about today is just the intersection of leadership and recalls, and how do you lead, right? How do you lead the preparation of recalls, but then even if you have to go through a recall, you know, how are you leading in that space? So, and you guys know us, the people that are on, but if you are new to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill, like that's what we talk about. We really do talk about how do these technical pieces really intersect with leadership. Because that's what we do. We focus on technical leadership development. And, you know, we're really the only organization that has these coaching-based programs that's designed specifically for you in technical, because we've been where you are, right? Like we've been through the mock recalls. We've been through maybe a recall. We've been through situations where we needed to withdraw, or we were this close, right, to having the recall. And so, you know, we've really developed our leadership development programs, our path, right, to help support people that's in these spots, because we really do need to lead differently, right? In those spots, we're very different when you think about leadership in sales, or leadership in marketing, or leadership in maintenance, even, right? Like we have this role that can be hard and heavy because of things like recalls.
Yeah.
And I've just figured out how to see the comments. So I read Felix's comment.
Awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree to what he's saying. And that is so true, because data usually is out there. And we have seen this in a very recent recall. The data has been there. It has just not been used. And the companies were just, you know, kind of trying to hide what was going on. And that to me is a best example to have a recall poorly managed and carried out. Because, I mean, in the end, and that is just so narrow-sighted.
Yeah.
If I work at a company and I process food, or I manufacture, or, you know, whatever it is, we're all consumers.
Yes.
So I put myself, my family, my friends in danger, as well as anyone else. And it's just so, it should be a no-brainer to do a better recall, to be better prepared. And you were talking about mock recalls, Tia, and that's actually where the whole thing starts.
Yeah.
We would have to redefine the word mock recall, because how it is carried out these days mostly is more like a traceability practice.
Right.
And that's not at all what we need. I mean, of course, it is important to gather data. We need to know which products are affected, who received the products, and what to do with them. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that we destroy them. They can be donated. If, you know, like there's just a minor difference in color of a certain product, but it's perfectly fine to eat it. So getting all that information is the very basis of a mock recall. You would have to practice all that's coming afterwards as well, because that's where the whole work starts. So you would have to send out information, and you would have to make sure your contacts receive that information. But then again, also, you would have to learn, what am I going to do with the responses?
Right.
What am I going to do with the numbers that people send back to me? What can I use them for? Where do I store them? Where do I store them? You know, things like that. And so that is a whole new definition of mock recalls. And the industry is slowly starting to realize that. And that's what we are really trying to educate all our customers to agreeing to that.
Well, and we're going to talk more about that. And I love how we're jumping in. And I want to make sure we introduce you, because we want to talk about that more. And we want to talk about why, like, the best written recall plans, they don't work if you don't have the right leadership and you don't have the right tools to navigate it.
Yeah.
And I think what you've talked about is, too often what we see now is, once again, it's become a check the box exercise. Yep, I have a recall plan. Yep, I've done a mock recall. But Tia and I were talking about this earlier. I have yet to see a mock recall that actually more authentically mimics what happens in a recall.
Right.
Which is all part of why we talk about how do we step into better, how do we change our leadership around recalls so we have better outcomes.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, as we jump in, I imagine there's people in our audience who are like, who is Stephanie?
Sure.
How about we start there? Would you even start and introduce yourself for our audience so they know like who you are and like why you're here today with us?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jill. Yes. So my name's Stephanie, and I'm the general manager of Recall InfoLink GmbH in Germany. Our mother company, the Inc., is based in Boise, Idaho. And we have a software solution to help you manage and communicate recall information in a standardized way globally, because we know from experience that, and companies know that as well, they just don't think about it. Supply chains are global, and it doesn't make sense to have a solution that helps you communicate recall information and responses only within your company and your point of sales. You have to get everyone along your supply chain involved, and these days that means a global supply chain. So we are here to make that global and support you and make it faster and easier for you to communicate and get products off the shelves. Really, that's what it is. We're in the cloud, so all you need is get an account, sign up with us, and you get an account. No implementation needed, no IT needed to be involved, and yeah, you can start as soon as you sign. So that's really easy, and you can use it for doing mock recalls, as we would say, in the most efficient way, because you go all the way through. You send out information to your either just within your company, to your quality team, have them on board for the practice, or some of our clients actually do that, involve your own customers in a mock recall. And that is also, in my opinion, very beneficial, because first of all, it supports what you're doing. It helps your customers know what they need to do once they receive your information. And also it builds trust, because your customers see, oh yeah, so my customer is actively practicing, and I know that I can rely on the data that I'll be receiving once there is a live recall. And that's what's most important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when we first met, it's a couple of years ago now, we became fast friends, because I was like, what you have is something I wish I would have had for many, many years. A system that made it a lot easier. And I think that's part of, when we think about our roles as leaders in food safety and quality, it's meant to enable processes to run easier. It's meant to enable people to make decisions better, faster, with the right information. And so when we have tools that help us do that, it's our roles as leaders to influence, to be able to have those type of resources to support us.
Yeah. But then again, the main challenge for leaders is to know that these tools are out there. And I just had a conversation just ahead of this live event with our communications coordinator. And we were agreeing on the fact that these days, the research is preferably done by leaders, by themselves, and they don't really want to be reached out to or kind of be bombed with information. They want to get their research done by themselves and then turn to companies, maybe 2 or 3 that are in their, that they have kind of closed down their decision process. And so then they want to have further information. But if they don't know about the solutions that are out there, I mean, how should they?
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
That's why tools like LinkedIn or doing these live events is so important to share your information and to raise awareness. And that's what we need, the support of the leaders to really figure out, this is my quality team and this is my product, and I need to enable them to do their job the best way possible and protect our customers, protect consumers, and let's not lose trust in of our consumers.
Yeah, I think all of those are really great points. And one thing that even just thinking through with my experience as we talk about mock recalls, some of the pieces, and I think it's because like really just starting in a plant, you really only see it from one end to the next, and then it just kind of stops, you know, especially because I was in like a large organization. So if we're going through a recall, like corporate is doing a lot of stuff and we're feeding information right to them so that they can be the spokesperson and they can have everything together. But just me looking at it, just my responsibility, I almost didn't think about like the response from to the public, right? And how is marketing going to respond, and how is the sales team going to respond? And when you think about like connecting all the dots as a part of a mock recall, a lot of times we only, like you said, only really think about the traceability piece of it. But there's so much more in order to get your product back and to communicate even to the public on what not to eat or what to send back to the store or whatever it happens to be. Or, you know, like that information should be a part of your whole process on how do you communicate this. And, you know, it's one of the things that me in my bubble, until I started to like reach out. Actually, what I did is I did a presentation around like a recent recall that my organization had, and I pulled in all the functions to talk about their piece. But it was really at that point that I was like, wow, you know, legal hadn't, you know, like this is what they're doing. This is what, you know, marketing's doing. This is what sales doing. And it's like, how do we connect those dots and make sure that that is a piece of the mock recall, so that everyone's not like, oh my God, this is real. You know, what do we do type thing.
Yeah. And actually, not only the internal circle of people or departments that are involved, but also the external parts. That's why we talk about recall ready communities, because it's really a community. It doesn't affect only your own company. It reaches way further, and you want to make sure to get a hold of everyone involved in that specific recall. And as you said, best all the way down to the consumer. And that is having a system that enables that is just priceless. Or not too expensive if you use ours. It's just really a good solution that's out there. And
I like how Felix calls you the recall InfoLink the doctor. I play the role of the doctor.
We're trying our best, really, Felix. We are.
Well, right, Ian, there's other things that are going on, but we still need, sometimes we need the doctor to help be like, this is how we need to get this fixed.
Yeah. Right. And it's just like with a doctor, you don't want to talk about your own illness. You don't want to go there unless it's really unavoidable anymore and you feel really sick. But actually, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to do it. It's just a thing you have to do eventually. And same with recalls. I mean, I understand that people don't want to talk about it. And, you know, it's never the right time to really talk about it. If a company just had a recall, they just like, phew, I'm glad it's over. If they're in the middle of a recall, they have better things to do than talk about a recall. Yeah. But then if you're waiting too long, they have forgotten all about it. And it's more like, recall, we don't have recalls. Our product is safe. We have high quality standards.
Right.
It's true, but things do happen, as we all know, and recalls happen. So yeah, you have to have a way.
Yeah.
You know, even as we were thinking about what we all wanted to make sure we bring out for our audience today, right? One of the things was around this, the mock recall. And I do like coming back to that, because I think that even as you talk about when do we think about improving our recall process, that often it takes a back burner because there's more, there's fires that are burning that require urgent attention. And if you're not in the middle of a recall or like on the cusp, right, it usually doesn't get that attention. But even with a mock recall, like sometimes we can see this. I'll go to Felix talking about like the doctor and the symptoms. I'm aware of some companies, right, even when you run mock recalls, where they're typically scheduled, like, hey, 9 o'clock on Tuesday, we're going to run a mock recall. And it'll get pushed around because, something came up and we need to move that mock recall to a better time, or it gets pushed back another week or another month, or gosh, this person's on vacation and we can't run the mock recall. And I think about how all those things, like how do all those things tell us about the culture of the organization when it comes to recalls and being recall ready?
Yeah.
That's really important. And that also, coming back to your leader approach, you have to have a leader who supports that and kind of stands up for that and makes you do the mock recall as scheduled, and not just let whatever come in, and kind of suddenly be more important or whatever it is. It's just, you have to follow through, because what is more important than losing your customers, losing the trust of your consumers, losing a lot of money? I mean, that is essential to a company. And the costs of a recall that's been handled poorly, they are several $1 million. And if you handle it properly, and if you act fast and accurate and try to get products off the shelves as fast as possible, you can save so much money. And the trust that the consumer has in your company, I mean, they will of course be at first be a little bit like, what's happening here? But then they will realize, okay, well, things happen, but we have been informed, and they've not been hiding information. They've been open. They let us know as soon as possible, and that is so important.
Yeah. And you want to know those gaps, right, in the process, where it's like, okay, if Stephanie's on vacation, right, and we go through a recall, do we actually is her backup ready, right? Like, do we have someone in place that can help execute? Like, you want to know what those gaps are, especially when you're running mock recall, right? Like, that's the time, right? That's the time. And like, even with Felix calling out, like during his auditing days, like companies would deliberately withheld information from him. And it's like, during exercise, like that's where you want to catch those gaps, right? Like that's where you want to document them and close them, because there may be a time that you have to go through a recall, and if you do not know those gaps or haven't closed those gaps, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's stressful as it is, but we really want to try to lower the stress as much as possible by practicing what it is you need to be doing. And so we recommend doing a mock recall twice a year at least. I mean, as you said, Tia, because of vacation or sick leave or people leaving companies, and you have to have backup people who know how to jump in and help out when it's needed. And once you're a manufacturer, or if you're a manufacturer, you don't have to do a live recall that often, maybe every 3 or 5 years. But you need to be prepared. You never know when a live recall hits you. And so it's kind of like, it's a little bit, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous not to be prepared, because you never know when you ought to be communicating recall data. And
it goes all back to, and I don't know the quote specifically, right? But if you don't plan, then you plan to fail. And with recall, like if you only plan to do, like partial, I'm going to call it a partial mock recall, because I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Then you'll only be partially ready when you have a recall. And I think we probably are all in agreement. It's not a question of if we have a recall, it's likely more when we will have a recall.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if we are only doing these partial preparations for a mock recall, then we're really putting, like you said, our organization at risk. And especially as we move into this era where people are looking for a different way to work. Like people aren't just doing the whole, like, I'm just going to show up. I'm going to do what everybody tells me. I'm going to work however many hours are needed. Yes, recall situations are different, but people are more looking for organizations who are concerned about their well-being and willing to invest in what types of tools or processes help so that I can do my job better, easier, and faster.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
A tool that you can manage your recalls on your mobile phone, on your laptop, or you're not always in your office at your desk. So if you have a tool that you can use using your phone or your iPad, that helps tremendously. It doesn't really matter where you are. You can be in a warehouse, you can be in your store, you can be at home, and it doesn't matter. because it's in the cloud, and you can have, as soon as you log in, you can manage a recall. You can start a recall. You can respond to a recall, no matter what position you're having within the recall process. You can do all of that, no matter where you are, as long as you have internet connection, of course. But that should be a given.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about that importance of having a digital tool, right, to help standardize that communication, speed up, so it could be sped up, right, and we can instantly know, like, where do we have, who do we need to communicate to. So we're kind of falling into this area of why it's important to even have a digital tool to help you do that. A lot of my mock recalls, right, have been on paper and trying to figure out, like, where's the paper documents, because that's what we have. When I had systems that I did have a digital tool, it just makes it that much easier, right? And then it's not like, oh my gosh, we got to run a mock recall, right? It's more like, let's run through the exercise to make sure that there's no gaps, that we have the people that, something hasn't developed, and it's not overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Because you have the right tool for the job.
Well,
right.
You bring up a really good point, Tia, right? What are the foundational pieces that need to be in place, regardless of what type of digital tool you use? And I imagine, Stephanie, right, if you have a foundation, moving to a digital tool is that much easier. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I would recommend to have a CRM system, an ERP system in place, because otherwise, I mean, if your company is not digital or at all, that makes it kind of challenging. Although these days, I would probably say you have to be digital in a way, because otherwise you're kind of losing out on what's going on the market.
Right. Yeah.
So for communication, you have to have something in place already. And then if you do, it's easier to have a new digital solution for a recall work for you and help you. And to your point here, that is also a huge benefit if you have a tool like that. And then you have automated generated reports. It makes your audit so much easier. I mean, usually when you have paperwork, you have to go to actual physical files, and you have to go through the papers, and you have to look for the papers that apply to the specific recall. Whereas when you have a digital tool, you log in, you click on that specific event, and you have a report that tells you when you informed your customers, when they received the whatever it is you're reaching out to, the email, phone, SMS, text, or even fax sometimes. So you have a timestamp on that. Also, you have a timestamp on when they responded. You have the number of products, exact products that they have either destroyed or sent back, and you have all of that right there in your computer, in your account, first of all, and then so you can, whenever there's an audit, you just log in, go to that specific event, click on the report that you need, and it's right there. And you can either email it, and you don't even have to print it. I mean, you could, but you could just email it to the auditor, and it's just so fast and sufficient.
Yeah.
Also, it saves you so much time as well on both sides, auditor and the quality team.
Yeah. I think some of the people too, like that's listening to us, like they're probably in the boat of like, yeah, this will help me do my job a lot better. And I think when people are thinking about that's in food safety and quality, I'm like, well, how do I really just get my leader on board? And I think it goes back to what Jill was just asking around, like needing that foundation. A lot of times, because we know like what it's going to take to do all this, like we want to go from nothing to having the technology. But one way that you can kind of think about it, if you're struggling with this, right, in your organization, is to let your leaders know, show them how much more time they will get back if they had a digital tool. And so that means having that foundation of, okay, yep, we have this paperwork. This is how long it takes us to do the mock recall. This is how many bodies we need to pull that document, the documentation, right? This is how many bodies we need to even put in the documentation, right? And to set it up. And being able to show that, okay, this is what we have to do, right? We have this foundation, we have the data around it. This is how much time, energy, money, you know, all of that piece that we will save if we had a digital tool.
Right. And I mean, Tia, believe it or not, there are still companies out there who do not send emails, but send letters with recall information.
Wow.
I mean, imagine how long that takes to inform your customers, not to speak of the consumers. I mean, that is just so incredible. And I mean, as I said before, having a digital tool actually in this context should be a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, true, but right, we're always working on how do we influence. So even in those situations, like what have you seen work or tried when it comes to leaders looking to influence perhaps decision makers and explain the risk of having snail mail or the risk of it takes, I mean, because I've been in situations, right, where it takes longer than we want to be able to collect the customer list, or where you know that we could have and should have had information out sooner. So what have you seen, or like how have you seen clients that you have now or people that you've worked with begin to be better influencers in that space?
That's a tough question. Chill, because sometimes I'm still out there and trying to figure out how I can get them on board. But actually, you know, after Corona or COVID has happened, it's in Germany, people or companies have opened up to digitalization, and it's kind of become a very important topic to me. So I do a lot of presentations on digitalization because I want to educate people and try to make them see that it's not as bad as they had kind of anticipated it to be. But with all the online things and you know that came out of COVID, that made it a little bit easier in general to open up to digitalization and digital tools in general. When talking to companies and leaders, though, often they are already on board with digitalization. What sometimes helps is looking at the finances and clearly showing them this will save you a lot of money. And you know, we have a lot of papers on recall economies. So that is, and you would not believe how much money you could save when you use a digital tool, because that helps so much, and it even affects parts of your company that you would have not thought of. So that is also something that you can talk to leaders about. I mean, the quality team would not care that much of finances, but if you talk to the leaders, that is a topic that they really are open to listen to.
Absolutely. And you know, that's one of the things that Tia and I, we work as we are in our coaching programs, is our circle of support is so important. And in that, you need to have a finance person.
Yes.
You need to have somebody who you can ask questions, who can help you navigate different situations, who can help you give kind of that even over that bigger picture of what's happening in your organization. So that you can then better assess, like, okay, what's the likelihood that this could move forward? Or where does this place in with all these other priorities that are drawing financial resources right now? And really get them to be an ally to help you make progress on these types of requests and help put numbers together that will speak to your leaders so that you can get the support.
And it's just so, it could be so easy for them. And usually when you talk to companies, or when I talk to companies, it's mostly getting them to have, you know, kind of overcome that, oh, I don't want to talk about recalls, and this is an uncomfortable topic, and it's just, I don't feel really safe, and I don't want to share my data, and blah blah. But once you get to talk to them, and once you get to show them a demo, and you know, they see for themselves how easy it is and how a standardized system is beneficial to them, then that often helps it by itself.
I'm curious, like we've mentioned a couple of times, and Felix mentioned it in the comments. I would love to hear anyone else that's listening, their perspective on not wanting to talk about like recalls and like not really wanting to have conversations to help you prepare for a possible recall. Because, I would say like that's kind of new to me almost, like and maybe it's just because I've always had those open conversations, and even in companies where, I was helping them build their food safety culture, right? In their food safety programs, recall was like one of the top things of like, do we have a recall plan? Are we able to execute a recall if we need? Like, that's one of the first things that I even talked about while, when joining the company. So I'm just kind of curious on like, has there been like who else had that experience of my organization doesn't really talk about recalls and doesn't want to talk about recalls?
Tia, I think there is a big difference in what position you approach a company or talk to them. I mean, if you're more like if you're part of the company already, you have a completely different standing. That's for sure. But also, if you approach a company as a consultant, that is also different. But when I talk to companies or when we're at trade shows or at conferences, it's more like I'm a service provider. So sometimes they go like, oh, I don't want to talk to some other salesperson. It's just, I don't want to listen to them. And I think that might be the reason for the different approach here.
I see. Yeah. That makes sense. Because even Felix, you were kind of talking about you came as an auditor too. Yeah. Right. And it's whether or not you want to talk with the auditor about,
That's another completely different position in this whole.
Yeah, I can see that.
Already community. As I said
right.
before. Yeah.
But it's one of the things like where if you don't want to talk to the auditor about the recall, then you need to have your ducks in a row, right? Where you are able to pull what they need and have the conversation that you need, where you don't need to withhold information because you have your ducks in a row. You're able to recall quickly. You're able to get this information. You're able to understand from the beginning to the end, right? On how you would pull back this product if you need to.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and what are the things that we can share? I think, Tia, like you said, if we're not willing to talk about it. So, right, the things like, wow, it took us way longer to get the customer list out than we wanted. And that's because we had way too many layers that were manual in it. Yeah. And instead of having it done, my expectation is it should be almost immediate, right? Because if everything is hooked up correctly, that's ideally where we'd be at. And so I'm often floored when I've worked at companies or worked with companies where it's taking hours, or maybe even like we can locate product within the time frame, but we don't have all of the customer information ready to go right away.
Right.
And I think if we don't talk about that, then we feel like it's just us. Like we're the only ones who have a system that can't do this immediate communication tracking. But the reality is that there's these little spots that probably pop up in more situations than not. Where, it's things like we used to hear about, right? Like maybe it's product that went through a channel that's not normal. So for example, we used to have kind of like our donations. For a while, they kind of went on their own system. How do you roll those into the bigger system? How do you find some of these things that we consider them one-offs, but if we don't talk about it, we don't know to even look for it.
Right. Yeah. That is so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jill.
No, I'm just cheering. Like, yes, we have to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want us to talk a little bit about the leadership, right? And really, how do we get our leaders to have this open mindset to try new and innovative solutions? To support recalls, right? In this situation, we're talking about recalls, but how do we really open leaders' minds to have this conversation? And I think, Stephanie, you brought up a really good point on like thinking about money, cost savings, over time, right? And I wholeheartedly believe that as a food safety and definitely as quality, we should be having those conversations around and identifying areas that we can save money, people's time, right? And be efficient. And, you know, I think some of the things that you mentioned, Stephanie, is that like having a tech solution can be a driver for that.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it should be what a leader kind of has as his or her skills to look for such a solution and to support your team and to constantly look for improvement and try to figure out what is beneficial for the company, what helps save time and money and makes life of their quality teams way easier. But that is, of course, maybe sometimes a dream. Not all leaders are that way. But yeah, honestly, I think they should be. I think that should be part of their skills to become a leader. And yeah, but it comes down to this. If people don't do research and don't constantly try to figure out what new companies might be out there, what new solutions are out there, nothing will change. And that's why it is so important to have things like this live event with you guys, or in general, use social media to kind of get a better awareness of things that are new and solutions that are new.
Yeah.
I think these days, that is exactly how we can reach companies and can reach leaders and inform them and just provide first information to get their interest and then take it from there. Because if you don't know about something, how can you act on it? You know, you need to get the information first.
Yeah.
You know, that's a really good point, because I think when we talk about recall, I think it's one of those things. Here's what I do. I'm like, oh yes, recall again. Yep, we need to have the basics on recall. But it's a good challenge even for me to think, when's the last time I leaned into being more curious about what's the latest going on in recalls? Because even though it's a standard, I mean, there's a standard process around like what recall needs to be in the outcome. But yet when we simply shift the question about like what's new in recalls that I need to know about, that puts that instigates a different thought process to be able to be more curious than just to go, oh, yep, I already know the standard recall process.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I think that kind of falls into how do you free up time for your leaders to be able to have those conversations, right? And have those thoughts and be able to research. I love it, Stephanie, when you're like, leaders should be thinking this way, even though some leaders don't. I mean, it's honestly the reason why we developed our leadership programs, right? And why we base it in coaching principles, because leaders should be thinking this way, but we're not taught to do that, right? Like we're not taught to think about our technical roles in this way. And that's what we focus on as a part of our leadership development path, on like, how do you, behave as a leader, and how do you bring these things out of your teams, and how do you communicate even up, right? Like if you're not the head of the organization, and how do you have that curiosity that Jill's talking about, so that after you kind of build your system, right, which is what we focus on, how do you make sure that you're not overwhelmed, right? And that you have this time and that you are structured in a way that you can think about, okay, what's happening in the recall world? What technologies exist out there, and how do I bring that into my organization to save on time, money, and resources, right?
Yeah. And Tia, let's not forget about this very important point. People hate changes. So if you come up with something new, you won't hardly ever address a group of people going, yay, a change, finally.
That's what we want.
Yeah, I doubt that. Usually you're more facing a group of people going, oh no, not again. You're used to our process and now you want to change it again. So you have to make it really easy on them to embrace that change and see the benefits. But that also has to start in the minds of the leaders, how to communicate best to your team.
That's very true. And I think along with that process that we need to navigate better with change management, which I'm going to say people change management,
Yeah.
is, recognizing that our brains are hardwired for negativity bias, right? Instead of being like, wow, the sun's out today, we're like, today's not going to be a good day. The same thing happens when we think about like things at work, which on one hand wires us very well when we think about risk, because we're thinking about all the things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
I think we also have to then really be aware of when we fall into this mindset or this attitude, so that we can use the other side to think about all the possibilities and what could go right.
Yeah.
And I think that plays into that change management, because I imagine you've heard this, but like, oh, another electronic system. Like, we already have one. Or how will that fit with everything we have already? Or we're only going to use it maybe never. So why would we want that?
Yeah.
And I think even once again, how do we shift so we ask different questions so that we trigger the other side instead of the negativity that comes out with it, right? Like, what are the things that it opens up because we have this is essentially like this insurance policy that we know it will go right? What are the things that it helps alleviate from our team members because there's confidence in our systems work well?
Yes. Yeah.
We need different questions to drive different conversations. That's culture.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's absolutely where we need to be heading. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how you ended it with like, that's culture, like as we're trying to define, right? Like, what does it mean? Food safety culture. What does that mean? Like, that is culture, making sure that, these things are integrated into the way that you are doing business and life, right? And that people have these positive outlooks on their roles and on the organization. Well, that's good culture, I guess, positive culture. If it's the reverse, you still have culture, right? It's just a negative culture. But like that's the things we should be focused on as leaders as we are looking to grow or strengthen or change our food safety culture. And change management is a part of that, right?
Yeah, and that's part of that learning and growing. So even when we talked about how do we perhaps include someone, I'm going to say you need to include somebody from your finance department, right? But that in itself, doing something different like that is part of shifting your culture to where you want food safety to go. It's recognizing that we need to be integrated in the business. We have a huge business impact besides, I always say the monopoly money. But it's demonstrating that we are willing to be different as we interact with the organization. Because we're looking at this financial side. We're looking at risk differently. And so that in itself is part of what helps change that conversation for us to have people maybe be curious and go, why are they working with the finance person? This is interesting.
Yeah. And also, as you just mentioned, Jill, it is an insurance for your company. And it just helps you, be better prepared. And also, I think it used to be that the QA department was more like they're only causing costs. They're only adding in a negative way. They're adding work. They're telling us what's going wrong, what we need to change. It costs money and a lot of money. They're the ones to blame when we have a recall, things like that. So often the QA department was kind of had a negative label to it. And to change that, I think, is so important, because the QA department has such an important role within a company, and they should be listened to more closely and be just more seen as someone who can help a company gain trust and just keep that trust and make sure that the product is safe. And when it's not, just act fast and try to protect the consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the point around like blaming food safety, blaming quality for recalls, it's one of the reasons why you need everyone in the boat with you, right? Because in the past, it was just quality going through this, right? Exactly. And it was just us trying to pull the papers together and trying to get, when everyone's in the boat with us, then everyone feels that accountability, right?
Yeah.
And everyone is a part where it shouldn't be me, you know, as a food safety person, you know, doing the root cause analysis, right? That might not be where I need to spend my time. Maybe my operations counterpart need to do that part of it. You know, maybe, you know, whatever, all the pieces of the process, it can't just be us. That's a part of it. It can't be, right? And now when someone's ready to blame, right, food safety, quality for a recall, now everyone's here, right? Everyone's being a part of it. And we know, which we always knew, right? Like it's obviously not us to be blamed, but we're here to help get the organization through it if it ever comes down to it.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you maybe heard my little beep, 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 because our time, it goes so quickly when we're on our show. And, you know, I was thinking about the top takeaways for our audience, and I'd love to hear what you think. But I think it's number one, like, start running mock recalls that are more real. We're thinking about how it's going to be more real. Don't just keep checking the box.
Yes.
You know, really lean into like your financial person. When you think about, gosh, I'd like to have a better tool to help me with recall. Like, help develop that financial case for action. Help look at the potential risks to your business through different eyes, so you can have different conversations. Which really goes into the third one that I jotted down quick, was change the conversations around recall. If you want different outcomes for support, you've got to ask different questions. You need to be curious in a new way. And if our goal is to have food safety and quality viewed as an ally, as an integrated business partner, then really it's our food safety leaders, it's our responsibilities to do that. We are the ones who need to be better influencers, better integrators, really develop different skills to help us move in that direction.
And because Catalyst exists, there's really no excuse, right, for leaders to not have that know-how, right, of how to be that better leader, because it's so important that food safety and quality is viewed as that ally, is viewed as that integrated trusted business partner. Like that is it. We have to do that if we're going to have stronger food safety cultures, if we're going to be able to manage the load, right? Like it has to be a part of that. If we're going to be able to have more efficient recalls, right? When they happen. That's a part of it.
And luckily the roles of leaders are slowly changing. I mean, if I look back at 10, 20 years, a leader was just someone who didn't really care, but tell you what to do, and you had to follow it. And no, you didn't really have a voice. You were, you know, you had to do what you were told to do. And luckily that has changed, and it's now a completely different role of a leader, more of a supporter, a mentor. Someone who tries to figure out what he can do to make you shine, because if you shine, he shines. Or she, sorry. So that is really a wonderful thing that we're evolving in that direction.
I agree.
Yes.
Not over yet, though.
No. But you know, Stephanie, it's been great to have you on. And of course, if you are listening, whether you're live or you're on replay, you know, reach out to Stephanie or connect with her on LinkedIn, because, you know, maybe Recall InfoLink is a solution, I think, for many. But, you know, at least you can gather information and have a conversation and see what's out there, so that you have a stronger food safety system. You have more confidence in your system. Those are all really important parts of what we do as food safety professionals.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's part of your research.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you also have your email up. So, you know, people will be able to reach out to you directly on your email.
I'm happy to connect with you all, and happy to have a conversation. It does not have to be a sales conversation, just in general talk about recalls, or if there is some information that I can provide that is beneficial for you, or just, you know, exchange ideas, thoughts. I really love to do that. And so I'm always here and happy to connect.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Well, and as we talk about recalls, you know, one thing that I love to share, because I think it's so compelling, is when we talk about being a better leader to better influence recalls, 74% of people say that lack of professional development keeps them from reaching their full potential.
Wow.
Wow.
That's incredible. That means we have a gold mine of people who are just waiting for someone to like unleash them so that they can do more, better work. So good news, we have the solution to Catalyst. And in fact, our boot camp, that is the first tier of a multi-tiered program, starts January 26th. And we are super excited to have people who are already signing up and saving their seats for people where they want to have better leadership skills, or they want people on their teams to have better leadership skills, and really lean into how can we be more curious, more supportive, more self-aware, things that are key to being a leader. And I don't know if anybody's bold enough, but if you're joining us, I'd love to have a thumbs up in the chat.
Yes. We're excited about it. Yeah. And we would love to hear about your excitement, or if you're ready to sign up because you're ready to step into that leadership role. Yep. Send us an email, right? Reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're happy to hear from you. Happy to get you signed up because, like Jill said, people are already signing up. We have a great group, and I'm super excited about this cohort, right? Email us too. We also have, I'm sure we're going to get this information out, but we have an outline of the modules, and I am just so excited about it because we revamped it a little bit. And so we're excited about it, and we would love to share it. So please send us an email. Let us know. We'll love to connect.
Yes.
Yeah, please do reach out to those two amazing ladies. They're doing such a wonderful job, and I'm so happy to know these two and have finally met them this year in Pittsburgh. Yes. It was a blast. That has been one of my highlights of this year, to be honest.
I agree. That was fun.
Yes, we had a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing you again too, right? In the new year.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And thank you so much for having me on this chat. It's been amazing.
Of course. Thank you. And thank you to our audience for being here. We really appreciate you showing up with us each and every week on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time, 11 Central time. And in Germany, what time was it?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Join us. And we do have our replays on YouTube if you want to check us out for a replay.
Absolutely. Okay. Wonderful.
So we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
See you
Thank
next
you
week.
very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.